Hello and welcome to the Economic Times Consumer Freedom Series, brought to you by the Times Group, the country's largest media conglomerate. I am Rini Simon Khanna, and I'm happy to speak with thought leaders from across the globe about the many issues relating to consumer freedom and their choices. In our discussion today, we will explore how the science around tobacco harm reduction is evolving and how public health policies and cessation strategies need to advance, keeping pace with it. Harm reduction is an alternative strategy for the smoker who cannot or will not quit. A multidisciplinary approach to harm reduction often includes pharmacological, psychological, and environmental interventions that are designed to reduce risky behaviors and their consequences. Researchers have found that abstinence may not be the realistic goal for people who engage in addictive behaviors, and that many clients prefer moderation goals, even after successfully completing abstinence-based treatment programs. To dive deeper into the subject, we have with us two eminent leaders, David Sweena, who's the adjunct professor of law and adjunct professor of medicine, University of Ottawa, and a global public health advocate who has worked on global tobacco and health policy issues to reduce cigarette smoking since 1983. He was, in fact, the first lawyer in the world to work full-time on these issues. David is in demand worldwide for his expertise on issues of tobacco, harm reduction, regulation, on economics and analysis of the tobacco industry, and has also worked with entities like the WHO, the World Bank, the International Union Against Cancer, the Pan American Health Organization, and of course, many other groups. We also have with us Dr. Sri Sucharita, the founding director of the Association of Harm Reduction Education and Research, the earliest registered medical professionals body in India for increasing public awareness of harms resulting due to various human behaviors associated with tobacco consumption, narcotics, alcohol, and of course, obesity. Thank you both, David and Sri, and welcome, of course, to this discussion. Let me begin by asking both of you to address this question. As we begin the new year, what are your expectations from your governments to encourage an evidence-based approach to policymaking? Sri, would you like to start first?
Yes. Thank you so much for this wonderful opportunity. As you said, when we begin this new year, we are definitely looking towards a most positive environment towards evidence-based medicine, because the pandemic is emerging on a daily basis. New guidelines, new frameworks are emerging for managing the pandemic. Similarly, towards the policies related to tobacco in our country, we would also like the government of India to adopt the same approach of science-based and evidence-backed policies. And we are hopeful that the government of India would adopt a similar approach, unlike the previous policies, which are stagnant at the tobacco control stage. In your opening remarks, you suggested tobacco harm reduction could be an alternative approach. We strongly believe that tobacco harm reduction could be the most practical approach in the context, because when you apply the principles of harm reduction in the pandemic, you're talking about masking, social distancing, quarantine. All these principles are geared towards harm reduction, right? Because we are talking about emerging trials for COVID vaccines, whereas therapeutics, newer molecules, next generation sequencing, all these new things are emerging, but still you are adhering to age-old harm reduction practices called masking, social distancing. Similarly, when you apply this to the tobacco harm reduction science, the similar enthusiasm is lacking. And we hope that in this new year, approaching tobacco harm reduction with same enthusiasm will bring more positive results in this tobacco scenario, because 300 plus million people in India are tobacco users. And as we discuss in the part of this discussion, we will discuss what are the burdens, especially in the low income groups, and how tobacco harm reduction could be the most practical approach, pragmatic approach in the continuum of care when you take it as a serious adoptive approach.
Right. David?
Yeah, I think that we're in a situation where there's really a battle. On the one hand, we do have this evidence-based approach to dealing with policy and dealing with public health issues. And as Shri has said, COVID-19 has accentuated that for many people. We have to be pragmatic. We have to pay attention to the science. We have to look at how do we empower consumers. Authoritarian approaches, moralistic approaches are very limited in their efficacy. At the same time, the issue of tobacco and nicotine is something that is seen by many people in a very moralistic sense. It makes it a topic that's easy for people to try to create a moral panic, to say that this is a moral failing of people, that we can just end it, to take an abstinence-only approach. And we see that divide here, and it's extraordinary when we look at issues of tobacco and nicotine, because we have known for over half a century that the reason people are using tobacco products is to get nicotine. But what's killing them is the delivery system. It's the inhaling of smoke, or it's a toxic smokeless product. We could dramatically, almost completely eliminate the risks that are currently killing over 8 million people a year simply by dealing with the delivery system. It's a very straightforward thing. Consumers have shown a willingness to do it. And we're seeing evidence from several countries now of very rapid declines in cigarette smoking once there's alternative products. And we've seen tremendous success on smokeless tobacco products in coming out with massively less hazardous alternatives. So the evidence is there. It's a question of, can we get past this moralistic, populist, moral panic approach and really pay attention to the science here? And I think that's the question. I think we will see more happening as more governments pay attention to the success of those who do take an evidence-based approach. And my hope, as I've seen all my career, is that good policy is contagious. Countries that do good things, other countries are going to follow it. So I'm optimistic in the long run, but it's very disheartening in the short run to see the opportunity being delayed, being missed.
Thank you very much, David and Shri. Shri, I'd like to ask you, as per the second global adult tobacco survey, India has the lowest, or rather the second lowest quit ratio. And this is among the surveyed countries, despite the high awareness that exists in society. Indian research reports only 2 to 5% smokers spontaneously quit smoking in India. What is the socioeconomic impact of prohibition and, of course, bans that take place? What has been the impact of India's moralistic regulatory regime?
To connect the lowest quit rates to this immediate past 2 years of bans, it looks a little bit complicated, Rini, because the lowest quit rates, especially related to smoking, is not in the past 2 years related to prohibition alone. The entire list of factors leading to lowest quit rates, especially among smokers, because it is because of very many factors, such as a lack of availability of cessation services. And second thing is low accessibility of smoking cessation aids. These are the two predominant factors. And the third thing is affordability of the available smoking cessation aids. When you talk about these three main determinants, these are the main drivers for low cessation quit rates in India. And as you quoted a Global Adult Tobacco Survey second version revealing those facts, we need to address where are these gaps and how the government can complement these factors in the federal system. Like all the government hospitals right now are not offering comprehensive tobacco cessation services. This is one side of the coin. Now, coming to the other side of your question, how these prohibitory policies enhance this kind of process of lowering the quit rates. Professor Sweener has alluded to the consumer movement bringing this delivery systems which are enhancing the consumers adopting moving away from harmful combustive products and adopting different delivery systems which will reduce the risks. And he has quoted evidence emerging from Sweden, Norway, and Japan. I will leave to Professor Sweener. He's more of an expert to talk about these trends, because every day I read his articles and his science to update myself. So when consumers are adopting these trends, when these prohibition policies are coming into the picture, they are hampering this progress. And when you have targets to be met, these kind of policy environment is not enabling that kind of progress.
Right. You mentioned that David has done a lot of research on countries like Japan, etc. So my question to David is, has India missed a real good public health opportunity with, these bans on e-cigarettes and ENDS and heated tobacco products? And how can South Asian countries like India learn from countries like Japan, which have successfully seen a 42% decline in smoking rates in just 5 years?
Well, I think India has certainly missed an enormous opportunity. And it's not just on cigarettes, but smokeless tobacco, which is, of course, the majority of tobacco use in India. Many of the smokeless tobacco products used in India are unnecessarily toxic. And the evidence of that is that in places like Sweden and Norway, with the oral product snus, it's manufactured to a standard to reduce toxins as much as possible. I mean, Sweden got into doing tobacco harm reduction just at the same time as they were getting into automobile harm reduction, with Volvo and 3-point seat belts and things. It was a very pragmatic approach of saying people are being harmed. What can we do to reduce the harm? We now have products that are used in Scandinavia, smokeless products, that have minimal risk. It's very hard to show increased risk for people who are using these products compared to people who use no tobacco products at all. When we compare that to India, we can see this huge opportunity, because it's so much easier to take a smokeless product and simply reduce the toxins in that product the way Sweden has done, the way Norway now does, the way Iceland has found. So that opportunity was missed. But also with cigarettes, we know that many of the people who smoke cigarettes will switch to alternatives if they're properly informed, if these products are available. And again, Japan is a great example of that, without really dramatic efforts to try to force people to change, they simply allowed it. They allowed heated tobacco products into the market. They didn't allow the whole range of other alternatives, but just with that one category, we've seen, as you said, over a 40% decline in cigarette sales in just 5 years. That's unprecedented. We have never seen anything like that in the history of tobacco control globally in any major market. And it's not a matter of forcing people to change. It's not a matter of coercion. It's simply a matter of empowering consumers to make better personal decisions. So that works. And it's how do we take something that works and put it in place of things like prohibition, which we have a very long history of knowing doesn't work. It's usually disastrous.
Correct. Dr. Stray, given the limited success of the cessation category in India, what are your views about India meeting its target of 30% reduction of tobacco users by 2025?
Yes. This is a very important question, because as just we discussed, 300 million tobacco users in India, of which 200 plus million are smokeless tobacco users. And typically most of them belong to low income group. And my research has been focused on these groups, especially migrants, LGBTQ community, who also have compounding this tobacco use with other substance use as well as mental health issues. So when you complement this entire picture and place tobacco as one of the slice of this pizza, you have to address this issue comprehensively. So when you want to address tobacco cessation services, we need to provide a comprehensive cessation services addressing the behavioral counseling services, access to these tobacco cessation services in the government hospitals, because these low-end income group, they access the services in the government hospitals. Apart from that, affordability, as we already discussed, the government has to think of providing a subsidized nicotine replacement therapy products in the government hospitals. Either they should be covered in the BPL card scheme or Pradhan Mantri Yojana schemes or some schemes, so that these people, whoever has an intention or willingness to quit tobacco, can immediately access. Here, I would like to refer the tobacco research conducted by Carl Erik Lund from Norwegian Institute of Public Health. In their latest study, they have identified different categories of tobacco smokers who has an intention to quit, who are seriously thinking of quitting. For such people, they highlight that stronger restrictions on outdoor smoking and reduced availability of cigarettes may provide opportunities to comply with real desire to quit. But there are other category of smokers who have no intention to quit. As you highlighted, that is where tobacco harm reduction concept rightly fits into the picture. For such people, providing awareness about reduced risk alternative products. In India right now, we don't have too many choices in that category. As Professor Sweener just now alluded, in the smokeless product category in India, right now, we do not have any options at all. And if you can substitute that nitrosamines, tobacco-specific nitrosamines alone, the entire toxic profile of this unregulated smokeless tobacco product range in India, which are cheap, widely available, very easily accessible in every petty shop, in every nook and corner of India. That is one of the reasons why women discreetly use smokeless tobacco use. The age of initiation of women tobacco use in India is 8 years, just because they can go and buy a pan parag, gutka, keni packet in around the street shop, because smoking is a taboo. But smokeless tobacco is a discreet practice. So smokeless tobacco issue remains a shadow. We have to myth bust, and we need to address the smokeless tobacco issue in India. And that is where reduced risk alternative products, minimizing the toxic profile is very important. That is where, if you want us to reach 2025 targets or 2030 targets, transitioning this entire environment, providing a wide range of reduced risk alternatives for a variety of income groups, not just high income group with some electronic nicotine delivery system with a price tag of 2,000, 3,000 accessible to elite section. That is not the only solution. That is not the only product we are talking in a country like India. We need a wide range of reduced risk alternatives, removing the toxicity profile suitable to the needs of variety of income groups, like a toolkit. And this should be, the first A is awareness, the second A is affordability, third A is accessibility, because smoking and tobacco is an issue even among women, sexual gender minorities, low income groups, mental health issues. So we need to keep this entire picture in mind and think of tobacco harm reduction.
Wow, that is a loaded plate, and I'm hoping that we should, see some change quickly. David, the WHO has, constantly attacked the tobacco harm reduction category, and despite the global success that we've seen across the world, what has been the outcome of the open letter that was signed by over 100 THR advocates at COP9? Are you expecting any positive policy changes?
I think if there's going to be a positive policy change at the World Health Organization on tobacco, it's going to have to come from elsewhere in WHO, senior management saying that the tobacco control section is out of control. It is not doing public health work. They've been captured by ideologues. As you said earlier, I've previously done work with WHO. It was a formerly useful organization on tobacco. It now combines really ignorance and arrogance. It doesn't really understand the issue, but it won't listen to anybody else. So we have a letter signed by 100 global experts critiquing what they're doing on tobacco issues. And I'm sure they're going to respond the way they responded to other critiques, which is they will attack us for having critiqued them. They will attack our institutions because we have dared to critique them. They act like a totalitarian state. It's very disappointing. I think the net result of what's happening with WHO now is that it's protecting the cigarette business. It is perpetuating an epidemic rather than countering it, because they've gone off on this moralistic, ideological bent funded from American philanthropy that has a history of having done this. You know, the American philanthropy has done some amazing things globally when they pay attention to very pragmatic enlightenment type interventions. They've created tremendous damage when they go in on a moralistic agenda and they want to use the power of the state to impose their moral views on the behavior of others. So I think that's going to be the challenge of whether we can straighten out the World Health Organization to become far more focused on health and less on this ideological big tobacco conspiracy theory, moralistic approach that they've been taking. And they just need to be open to the science. They need to be open to being pragmatic and listen to the critiques.
Yeah, I can detect a lot of anger there, David,
Yeah.
and rightfully so. Sri, what, according to you, are the clear challenges and obstacles in our country, in India, and its current nicotine replacement therapies, necessitating the need for THR products? And how have international countries developed successful NRT, and what are the learnings that are there for India?
Yeah, we already discussed the success in the international arena, like starting with Public Health England. It is the benchmark for all of us in adopting tobacco harm reduction in the public health policies at federal level. And Professor Sweener also alluded to the success stories in Japan, not just adopting one particular tool for just like a copycat measure, but realistically, according to the context, sensitivities of the cultural scenario, you can adopt whatever product suits the nativity and the region. And accordingly, the 30 years of Swedish snus, the scientific evidence, it is clearly established now. We cannot anymore say there is no more evidence for this product. So we can adopt the scientific approach and take the learnings from there, and we can make our own policies from that. And recently, the examples from New Zealand, Philippines, all these are showing, as professors mentioned earlier, it's only a matter of time for all this contagious positive news to spread across the globe to adopt one or other version of tobacco harm reduction as one of the components of addressing this tobacco epidemic in every part. Because as you highlighted, 80% of this tobacco burden is concentrated in low and middle income countries. So this is where innovation and solutions have to be emerging. That is where we need to look at locally and think regionally for our own solutions.
Right. David, there have been multiple reports on international anti-tobacco giants that are funding NGOs in low and middle income countries, in the Philippines, for instance, or in Mexico. How are these LMIC countries protecting themselves from such moralistic capitalism or foreign influence, as you say?
Well, some countries aren't protecting themselves very well. There's a tremendous amount of money, of resources that are going into these abstinence-only campaigns that end up protecting the cigarette business. We're seeing some countries fighting back. I think we'll see more of that. That I think there's a realization that it is simply unfair to fail to give people the information they need to make an informed decision, or fail to give them the options to act on that information once they get it, and then blame them when things go wrong with their health. I mean, that is simply unfair. And I think more countries are recognizing that there is this history of foreign interference on moralistic issues, whether it be on the efforts funded from the United States to ban alcohol 100 years ago, what became the war on drugs and that draconian approach to dealing with narcotics, reproductive health, the abstinence-only sex education approaches, things that have been disastrous. And I think countries can learn from that and to say they need to take charge of their own well-being. They need to empower their local consumers to make better informed decisions about their own health. And when we do that, we have tremendous gains. And in the meantime, I think we just use this well-funded campaign of abstinence and moralism as an opportunity to talk about what actually does work and to focus on the ability to do that.
Right. Sri, I'd like to ask you that by 2030, the proportion of tobacco-related deaths would have risen to about 70% in low-income countries. Why is there an urgent need for the Indian governance to consider progressive policies?
Yeah, the progressive policies are the need of the hour, because as we opened our discussion, right now we are making our policies on a daily basis with emerging evidence in the COVID labs, whether it's vaccine trials, therapeutic trials, or whatever. The same approach we can bring to other approach, because the same number of deaths from COVID infection are also happening because of tobacco, but no one is giving the same sense of urgency in drafting the policies. And the same tobacco control policies which we have been implementing for the past 15 years have not given us good results. Still 1.2 billion smokers are there in this, and there is not much good data to support the smokeless tobacco related deaths in these low and middle income countries. So to complement your question, progressive policies are the way forward. They will complement the current efforts, because tobacco prevention, tobacco cessation has to be sandwiched with tobacco harm reduction. That is the way forward.
So very quickly, Sri, I'm almost nearing the end of the section now, but very quickly, I mean, you know that bans are the worst form of regulation, and increasingly there is significant amount of misinformation around THR products and categories. And as per researchers, people are really not aware of the benefits of THR in helping, especially adult smokers, to quit. What are your thoughts on this, very quickly?
Yeah, as you correctly said, tobacco harm reduction remains a taboo topic even among medical professionals. So raising the awareness about the benefits of tobacco harm reduction is the first challenge we need to address, right? So in my own research, I have found a lot of opposition from medical fraternity to this concept. They believe, as Professor alluded to, the moralism is driving this tobacco control efforts. To shift the tide, we need to keep talking about the benefits of tobacco harm reduction. In my research, I interacted with 60 doctors. Whenever I talked to them about tobacco harm reduction, 40 of them changed their mindset. 20 of them are still adherent that tobacco control is the only solution for the people who are actually using tobacco. So it takes time, but we are persistent with our efforts.
Right. Thank you so much, Sri. I want to very quickly bring in David here to give us the global perspective. Various countries have taken different approaches to tobacco cessation. Some have incorporated it in their tobacco policies, for instance, Japan and the UK, others through the FDA route, that is the US. How can countries like India learn from these progressive policies? And you'll have to be very brief, David.
Sure. It's really quite simple. Look at the results. We are seeing some countries doing different things. Some countries have had a remarkable reduction in cigarette smoking.
How do we get them to do a copycat situation? I mean, you said that good policies are contagious. Why isn't it spreading?
Well, I think it is spreading. It's not spreading as fast as we might like, but it spreads when you have informed government officials looking at what can they do to improve things within their own country. What is the evidence from overseas? We also have the importance of consumers themselves speaking out to say, what about us? Why aren't you paying attention to our rights, our opportunities? Let us be part of the solution. That's what works for public health. And we need to do that. We need to empower consumers, but we need to listen to them, to meet them where they are, to understand their lived experience, and to come up with policies that allow them to improve their own health. And I think we're seeing that working in other countries, and I think consumers will get ever louder about their right to be able to do that everywhere in the world.
Right. Thank you so much, David and Sri, for the really detailed and diverse viewpoints and suggestions for the road ahead. The work of harm reduction movement is really a matter of life and death, and well-supported scientific evidence shows that medications can be effective in treating serious substance use disorders, but they are often underused. Thank you again, David and Dr. Sri, for joining us today and being completely honest and candid in your responses while sharing, of course, useful insights with us. To all of you, thank you for watching, and do join us again as we keep bringing to you interesting conversations on consumer freedoms.
Thank you.
Thank you.